What's up, folks? It's your boy MMG Smurf here, coming to you live for a pre-recording, I guess. And this is part of Money Match Gaming's Crypto Investo One-on-One, Crypto Investing One-on-One series, called The Fundamentals and Concepts. And today we're going to be covering the history of money, specifically in with a focus on the United States, history of money in the United States, and monetary policy. And so I'm breaking this down into different sections. And so, if you find this and you're watching it later, consider watching the other sections. Today, we're going to be covering the history of the dollar, specifically in the United States, paper money, gold, and the gold standard. And so these are three very important topics and concepts to understand before you can truly understand cryptocurrency and what some of the things that it's trying to fix, etc. are. And so that's why I chose these topics. I'm not a financial advisor. It's not financial advice. We're coming here from a lens of trying to learn and better ourselves, educate, and learn more. So I do have a special guest with me today. I'm going to go over to the window. You can finally hear them. Would you like to speak? Swampy.
Yo, what's up? Yeah. Finally get educated.
Cool. Yeah, so Swampy is a member of the Money Match Gaming community and team. Glad to have them over here with us. We've been talking about cryptocurrency for the last year or so, but I only just recently got them to finally start understanding things like Binance Smart Chain and decentralized exchanges and stuff like that. And I know, it's probably the case with Swampy as well as many other members in the Money Match Gaming community, which is that it takes a while to understand some of these concepts, to understand why somebody would want to do some of these things. And so hopefully this series helps break things down and helps people understand a little bit more what's happening in the world, what's happened previously, and what some of these things with cryptocurrency are trying to accomplish, whether that be NFTs or crypto itself, etc. So without any further ado, I think we should get started. Actually, push this up real quick because it's bothering me, graphically.
Let's get it.
Right, cool. Let's get it. All right. So this first video is titled "The History of the United States Dollar," and I'm gonna go down and start this thing.
Thank you to Target for supporting PBS. In 1519, the Bohemian Count Hieronymus Schlick discovered a rich vein of silver near his estate and decided to mint his own coins, named after the valley where they were.
I have to say one thing first. We are not going to be listening to this in normal speed. We're going to be listening to this in about 2x speed.
Yeah.
So
and then can you also put it like full screen?
Oh, what do you mean, like big across our entire screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you want to see the graphics and the pretty pictures? I got
you. Wait, are you saying I just need the audio?
No. I mean, pretty much. But I understand the visual appeal.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
I understand the visual appeal because,
Were mined, these Joachimsthalers, or Thalers for short, became so popular around the world that the word became synonymous. Thank you to Target for supporting PBS. In 1519, the Bohemian Count Hieronymus Schlick discovered a rich vein of silver near his estate and decided to mint his own coins. Named after the valley where they were mined, these Joachimsthalers, or Thalers for short, became so popular around the world that the word became synonymous with any big silver coin, from the Italian talero to the Ethiopian talari to the American dollar.
But why would an English colony use dollars instead of the currency of its motherland, pounds and shillings? Well, during the 1700s, London was intent on keeping as much gold and silver in the country as possible. They actually outlawed the export of their currency, even to their own colonies. That meant that American colonists had to rely on silver dollars from other countries, and the most plentiful supply came from Mexico.
Just south of the border, Spain was producing vast amounts of silver coins at the Casa de Modena de Mexico, still operating today as the oldest mint in the Americas. Officially called pesos, these silver coins were worth 8 reals, which is why you might have heard pirates call them pieces of 8. But to the American colonists, they were simply dollars.
No one knows for sure where the dollar sign came from, but two of the leading theories involve the peso. One is that the abbreviation for it, PS, became scrunched by hurried bookkeepers over time. Another suggests that the symbol refers to an image on the back of the coin, a pillar of Hercules with a banner wrapped around it in an S shape.
Still, coinage in the colonies was hard to come by. What little there was went to Europe to pay for imported goods, and it rarely came back. In 1729, a young printer saw how a lack of currency in Philadelphia was stifling the local economy, prompting him to write an anonymous pamphlet called A Modest Inquiry into the Necessity of a Paper
Ben
Currency.
Franklin,
This is the same man responsible for many famous financial quotes like "Time is money" and "Nothing is certain but death and taxes." Yep, it was Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin's advocacy of paper currency earned him contracts for printing money for the Pennsylvania colony, but the English crown saw this as a usurpation of its authority. By 1764, the British Parliament had outlawed the use of paper money in America, just one of many stubborn decisions that would eventually provoke the colonies to rebellion.
But to finance a revolution, you need cash.
Yeah, that's not to be undermined there. That is literally one of the major reasons that the United States colonies went to war.
So the newly formed Continental Congress authorized the printing of millions of dollars of continental currency. Originally, these continentals were valued at 1-to-1 Spanish dollar, but as more and more were printed, their value fell dramatically. If you've ever heard the saying, not worth a continental, that's where it came from.
Though the American Revolution became the first war financed and won with paper money, the American people felt totally burned. The Founding Fathers decided to avoid the controversy altogether by not mentioning paper money in the Constitution at all, and it would be almost 100 years before the federal government would print money again.
With the Coinage Act of 1792, the United States officially made the dollar the national currency. Instead of the confusing British system of pounds, shillings, pence, and farthings, the dollar would be neatly divided into 100 equal parts, which Thomas Jefferson suggested they call cents after the Latin for 100. Thus, the American dollar became the first fully decimal currency in the world. And the new coins were struck in the first federal building in America, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, which predates even the White House and Capitol.
Looking at these coins today, the first thing you might notice is what they're missing. Famous people. America had just dispensed with monarchy and elitism. The Founding Fathers wanted the images on their money to represent ideas, not people. So when did that start to change? The same time we started printing money again, the Civil War.
Before we get there, we should introduce an important but little-known figure in American history, Salmon P. Chase. Yes, that's salmon, like fish.
It's biblical.
Salmon was an anti-slavery senator from Ohio who earned his reputation as a lawyer defending black fugitives from being shipped back to their captors in the South. Salmon had his eye on the Oval Office for a long time.
But in 1861, Salmon lost the Republican nomination to the more moderate Abraham Lincoln, who went on to win the presidency. As an olive branch to the radical wing of the party, Lincoln made Salmon his Secretary of the Treasury, and it was under Salmon that the Treasury started printing paper money again to finance the Union Army. As ambitious as ever, Salmon decided to put the face of his ideal president on the first American $1 bill, his own.
The Treasury printed over $400 million worth of paper notes, which came to be known as greenbacks because, well, as with continental currency, greenbacks depreciated as more were printed, at one point only worth a third of their face value.
As bad as that sounds, it was a lot worse in the South. The Confederacy printed more than twice as many of their Confederate state dollars. The value dropped.
So I just want to pause really quick before we get to the end of this. That's two different terms for the United States dollar thus far that they were known by. Now we just call it the dollar, flat out. But previously, it was actually called the continental dollar, or then after that, greenbacks. And in our next video, we're actually going to go that much farther back in time.
So precipitously that by 1865, a $10 Confederate note would only get you 1 or 2 cents worth of goods. Incidentally, this bill printed in Louisiana was commonly known as a Dixie, thanks to the French word for 10. Some people think that's how the area around New Orleans got the moniker Dixieland, and how the South generally became known as the land of Dixie.
Neither Dixies nor greenbacks could be exchanged for gold and silver. Their value was based on the promise that the government would redeem them once their side won the war. With the North's decisive victory, Confederate dollars were suddenly useless scraps of paper, but the greenback became such a trusted standard that most people didn't even bother redeeming them, and America finally became a land of federally regulated paper money.
Ironically, in 1870, Salmon Chase, now a Supreme Court justice, claimed that the federal government had no constitutional right to force people to use paper money, effectively ruling against his own actions as Secretary of the Treasury. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that his face had recently been removed from the $1 bill and replaced with George Washington's. The ruling was overturned a couple of years later, but Salmon would eventually make his final mark on our currency, when in 1918, his portrait was used on the $10,000 bill, the largest intended for general circulation.
The next great leap forward for the dollar would be thanks to, you guessed it, another war. America emerged from World War II as a major global power. Its economy was perceived as so strong and stable that in 1945, the US dollar replaced the British pound sterling as the world's global reserve currency. Basically, this meant that banks and governments around the world kept more US dollars on hand than any other foreign currency and used it as the metric for their own currency's value.
Throughout the 20th century, the connection between gold and the dollar got weaker and weaker until it was finally severed by the Nixon administration in 1971. The US dollar is now a fiat currency, meaning its value is based only on the people's faith in their government. While that sounds...
Oh, snap.
I'm just going to say, it started before Nixon. And we're also going to cover some of that in the later topics that we have, like where that actually started and stuff. But I know you had that question to me right before we started, that like, oh, gold forward, they considered gold as a currency before? And it's like, yeah, the United States used to have gold as a currency. The United States used to be able to take your dollars that's what dollars used to represent, without getting too much into it. You used to actually be able to take dollars to the bank and get gold back.
Shit.
Sounds risky, it actually gives Congress more power to deal with economic crises, as it did just this March by printing extra money as a response to the coronavirus pandemic.
It's probably not a coincidence that over that time, we started to see more and more faces on our money. Faces that inspire trust and confidence in the American system. They're mostly ex-presidents and Treasury secretaries, though not all, and the final decision goes to the Secretary of the Treasury, with the only guideline that they be persons whose places in history the American people know well. However, in honor of our anti-royal origins, living people are prohibited from appearing on U.S. currency.
In 2016, the Treasury Department announced that it would unveil a new $20 bill in 2020, which would replace Andrew Jackson with famed abolitionist Harriet Tubman, making her the first African-American historical figure to appear on federal U.S. currency. Don't feel bad for old Hickory, though. He was vehemently opposed to paper money, so he probably wouldn't have wanted his face on the bill anyway. However, in 2019, the Trump administration announced that they would be delaying this change by another 10 years.
Racist.
As Americans, we tend to take the dollar for granted, almost like it's an unchanging natural phenomenon like earth, air, or water. But like any human tool, it was designed for a purpose, and we constantly shape it to meet the needs of the moment.
It can cause stress and greed and misery, but also hope and progress and prosperity. Without the dollar, we couldn't have declared independence or eradicated slavery. The more we understand it, the better we can control it.
So maybe the next next time you use a greenback, you'll think of the long journey it took to end up in your pocket. And that's our 2 cents. We'd like to thank Target for being a proud supporter of PBS.
All right. How'd you fare with that first video?
I learned a lot. I actually never knew where like the idea of the dollar came from.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I just never thought about that.
Yeah, it goes back. And like they're like, did they cover the? Yeah, they did in this one, the teller and whatever the heck. They did like a few different currency names and stuff like that. But it's just interesting when you actually know the history of money, where it comes about. I don't know if they cover it very much in any of these videos today, but I've mentioned before to people, this is actually how I became better friends with one of the Money Match Gaming team members, Camaraderie, who's very much into coin collecting and like learning and history and stuff like that. We were discussing how they slowly stripped the actual metals out of coins over time, throughout history. And most recently, I mean, we did it in America in like the last like 30 years or so. They slowly started taking all the quarters back out of circulation. And that's why now if you find quarters in circulation, this is just part of like knowing the history of currencies and whatnot, why I'm bringing it up. But like part of why they started taking old quarters out of circulation is because of kind of like what they were referring to with like the gold standard and silver being used as an actual currency and stuff for hundreds or thousands of years. And that's because those coins actually started to have more value than a full United States dollar bill. And so certain like, which is funny to think about, most people don't consider that, but depending on the quarter that you have in your pocket, it might actually be worth more than an actual dollar if you turn it into the right person. Same for those little $50 coins.
Really,
$50 silver, little 50 silver pieces that are old from like the 1950s or whatever the heck they're from. Those are worth more than $1 because of the amount of silver that is held in them, which is like, again, most people don't consider that. Oh, it's 50 cents. This is $1. No, that's what's written on them. Like, that's what's written on them. They're worth more than that because the dollar will fluctuate because it's inflated, and the way that it runs, the debt that it runs on. Even if you look at a purchasing power chart of the United States dollar over the last like 100 or 200 years or so, it's declined something like, the purchasing power of the United States dollar has declined by 2,000%. And it's not going to stop declining. It's going to slowly cost you more and more dollars to earn things. You see this all the time mentioned by older people that say things like, back in my day, I could get that candy bar with 10 cents or 5 cents or something like that. Most likely like 5 cents for a bunch of pieces of candy. Yeah. Was any of that new information to you?
Yes. The quarter thing, that's more interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like you're saying, you're saying a quarter can like be worth more than $1.
I forget how much how much it's worth, but I mean, definitely if you had 4 old quarters, it's worth more than $1. Because that's like, they actually have silver in them, and that silver is worth more than the paper that they print dollars on. So yeah, it's actually worth, and the dollar value.
I still remember like last year, and I forgot what it's called. Friday night, no. It was like Friday Night Live. I forgot. It's the one where Elon Musk showed up. Remember that one show?
Yeah. Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, Saturday Night Live. And then like, it was a skit, but like he was the little the casual. He was like, "This $1, right?" And he was like, "This is real, right?" And Elon Musk looks at it and he's like, kinda. That was funny. I was like, "Yo,"
because that's why this, like, the stuff we're going to cover today is truly